how does someone hide in plain sight? I mean, really hide. That's the absolute core of the Jeffrey Epstein saga. On one hand, you have this ghost of high finance, and on the other, a predator who operated for decades, basically protected by a fortress of money and powerful friends. In this explainer, we're going to piece together the public record to try and understand how this all happened, and of course, how it all finally came crashing down.
Okay, so to really wrap your head around the story, you have to hold two completely different realities in your mind at the exact same time. You've got the financer, this image Epstein built so carefully, right? The brilliant money man with an A-list social circle. And then you have the sex offender, the convicted criminal, who behind that mask was preying on hundreds of underage girls.
So the big question is, how did these two worlds exist side by side for so long? We're going to walk through it all, right from the beginning, his pretty mysterious climb to power, that web of influence he used like a shield, the awful crimes he committed, and the shocking end that, honestly, left us with way more questions than answers. And that really is the central puzzle, isn't it? How could a guy so visible in the world's most powerful circles run a secret criminal enterprise for decades? Let's start by digging into how he built that power in the first place. You see, his path to the top wasn't just about making a ton of money. No, it was about methodically, carefully building a foundation of influence that would, for decades, make him seem completely untouchable. His rise was, to put it mildly, unconventional and incredibly fast. I mean, look at this. In the 70s, he starts as a teacher at this super elite school. Even though he doesn't have a college degree, by the late 80s, boom, he's got his own firm. But then comes the real game changer. In 1991, he gets full control over the billion-dollar fortune of Leslie Wexner. That one relationship was the launchpad for literally everything that came next. Epstein's whole strategy was to create this vibe of extreme exclusivity. He'd tell people he only managed money for billionaires, making himself out to be this gatekeeper to a secret elite world. But in reality, a massive chunk of his wealth, we're talking an estimated $200 million in fees, came from that one single client, Leslie Wexner. That's what cemented his image as this financial wizard to the super rich. But here's the thing you gotta understand about Epstein. His real currency wasn't just money, it was his network. He painstakingly built this web of connections that stretched all across the globe, pulling in people from politics, royalty, science, you name it. This network, this was his shield. And this network, this was his armor. The names you're seeing here, they aren't just random acquaintances. They represent the pillars of global power: politics, royalty, big tech, and finance. When you're seen with presidents and princes, it creates this intimidating aura of legitimacy. It makes people think twice before asking tough questions. It basically made him seem like he was above the law. And that powerful network gave him the perfect cover for an absolutely horrifying criminal enterprise, an operation that victimized young girls for years and years, while the justice system, at least at first, just completely failed them. Let's be crystal clear about what he was accused of doing. This wasn't just about soliciting prostitutes. Nope. Epstein was accused of running a huge, organized sex trafficking ring, recruiting and abusing dozens, if not hundreds, of underage girls across his properties in Florida, New York, and on his private island. So when the police in Florida and then the FBI started looking into this in the mid-2000s, the evidence was just staggering. Federal prosecutors actually drafted a 53-page indictment detailing crimes against at least 36 young victims. And yet, that indictment was never filed. Instead, Epstein was offered a deal that is now, well, infamous. The deal that they came up with, which was negotiated in secret and hidden from the victims, was just mind-blowing. It gave him and any of his potential co-conspirators total immunity from all federal charges. He pleaded to a couple of lesser state charges, served just 13 months in a county jail, and for most of that time he was allowed to leave for work release. It was a sweetheart deal that just shut the entire federal case down. Years later, a U.S. appeals court would finally say what so many people were thinking, calling the deal a national disgrace. It was a huge moment of validation for the victims who had been ignored for so long, and it shined a spotlight on this massive, unexplainable failure of the justice system. But the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. More than a decade after that terrible plea deal, some incredible journalism led to new charges and Epstein's arrest. But his death in federal custody would stop a trial from ever happening and would leave the biggest questions of all just hanging in the air. The timeline of his last days is just filled with one red flag after another. After what was called a suicide attempt, he gets put on suicide watch. But then, just 6 days later, for some reason, he's taken off. Then, on August 9th, his cellmate is transferred out, leaving him completely alone, which is a major violation of protocol at this kind of high-security jail. So, the New York City Medical Examiner makes it official: his death was a suicide. But that conclusion was challenged almost immediately. A very famous pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, was hired by Epstein's brother to watch the autopsy. He later came out and said that the injuries he saw looked more like a homicide than a suicide, which just poured gasoline on all the skepticism and conspiracy theories.
And that skepticism wasn't just coming out of nowhere. An official investigation confirmed serious irregularities. The 2 guards who were supposed to be watching him fell asleep and then lied about it on the prison logs. 2 cameras right outside his cell just happened to malfunction. I mean, with this cascade of failures, it's pretty hard to expect the public to just accept the official story.
And that brings us to the final haunting question. His death meant the criminal case against him was closed, but it robbed his victims of their day in court to finally confront him. It left all of us wondering about the full extent of his crimes, his network, and maybe the biggest question of all: who else was involved? The case might be closed, but this story feels like it's far from over.